Deputy Broughan has question 36. Deputy Broughan to introduce.
Thanks, Ken Corley. Yeah, I asked about this whole area, I think, just earlier on, Minister, with Taoiseach Kenny. I still find the answers you've given to my colleague, Deputy Boyd Barrett, a bit dispiriting, in that the 43,000 pensioners you referenced are still going to be at a loss as the months and the years go on. So have you made any attempt to begin costing and ensuring that we could have a gender-proofed universal pension, and that we could move towards a system of caring credits?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
The state pension system is very effective in ensuring that pensioners have a decent standard of living and results in more gender equal outcomes in Ireland than most European countries. The gender poverty gap for the over 65s in Ireland, using EU figures, is 2.1% compared to 4.2% across the European Union as a whole. There are a number of reasons for this. Firstly, other EU state pension systems generally relate to the lifetime earnings. Ours does not. Secondly, our non-contributory pension is paid at 95% of our contributory pension rate. Finally, we have better provisions for widows in Ireland than in most EU countries. These factors result in the average payment to men over 66 being 2% higher than for women, despite lower average contributions into the Social Insurance Fund. This, combined with the targeted nature of the non-contributory pension, means that CSO poverty rates for men and women over 65 are both low and effectively at parity. A universal state pension paid to everyone over 66, regardless of the contributions they've made or their means, would either be very expensive, costing, we estimate, an extra €1 billion a year, or if introduced on a cost-neutral basis, would require a 14% reduction in the current rate of the state pension. This will be very difficult to justify, given that those with significant additional incomes will be the ones who benefit the most from your proposal. Work is underway to replace the yearly average system, as I mentioned earlier, with a total contributions approach, and the impact of this reform on gender is being considered very carefully and will be assessed for its respective impact on men and women.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy.
Well, I think your own department, Minister, in the summer of 2011, they warned strongly, according to the Cork Examiner, that did some research in this area, that the department should not have proceeded with these effectively massive cuts to the cohort of pensioners who were born from the late 1940s onwards and who had irregular, incomplete contributions, and who are now suffering year after year. In fact, if you look at it, that year, I think Deputy Burton said that it was a choice between 475 million cuts or 665 million. But in fact, if you look at the cumulative effect of the change that did take place, it may well run into hundreds of millions in terms of the cost to the people themselves. You now say it's 43,000. So you say that universal. I mean, would you agree that a universal, maybe Tier 1 pension is the first thing, should be your priority as Minister, before we start thinking about Tier 2 and Tier 3, and given the fact that there's massive tax expenditures on private pensions, something like €2.5 billion, which far outweighs the billion that you've just quoted.
Thank you, Deputy.
And should we be trying to get justice now at long last, for particularly the cohort of older women pensioners?
Yeah, I don't have a principled problem with there being a universal Tier 1 pension that's paid to everyone in the way child benefit is. And then the Tier 2 pension, the top-up to that pension, if you like, is based totally on the contributions that you've made. And I think if you're designing a pension system from scratch, you might very well do that. It would be a very good approach from my point of view. The difficulty with doing it, as I mentioned in my answer, is we estimate that it would cost €1 billion to do so. Or, if we were to do it on a cost-neutral basis, we'd have to reduce the existing state pension by 14%, and that's not something that's viable or doable.
Deputy Broughan.
I think Professor Barrett, as I quoted earlier on, of ESRI, he said what happened in September 2012 was the rules of the game were changed in the middle of the game in relation to the people who have retired and who were born from the late 1940s onwards, and that was a fundamental and grave injustice which you should make it your business while you're in this department to try and address. I referenced also the important age action study by Maureen Bassett earlier on today, which clearly attempted to estimate the kind of losses that those 43,000 pensioners and still you say 57, 58% is it of women, certainly a majority of women, have suffered since then. And I wondered again if you had read the report and the case studies and feel that it should be a policy initiative that you should address.
Minister.
I've read the Age Action Report. I can't recall exactly who the author of it was, but the way I intend to deal with this is by moving from a system of calculating a contributory pension, which I think is very unfair, to one which is simple and fair, which is one that is based on contributions. Pretty much anyone who has a contributory pension or an occupational pension, it's calculated based on the number of years that they're working or the number of years that they contributed. And it's a very simple and very understandable way of doing things. And that's not what we have now. So that's the approach that I want to go for. But I do bear in mind that there will need to be provision for home carers credits to recognise the fact that some people have to take time out of work to look after children or to look after disabled relatives, and that will have to be integrated into any change.